Okay, so what went wrong with the Sony Spider-Man universe? They did a lot wrong. They did a lot of things. Hi everyone, welcome to Trash Pickins. We pick apart some pretty bad films. I have reached into the trash heap all the way down to the bottom, and I pulled out the Sony Spider-Man Universe. All 6 great to not so great to awful movies. The big question I have, could Spider-Man have saved the Sony Spider-Man Universe? These 6 movies featured classic Spider-Man villains, but somehow Spider-Man wasn't actually in any of the movies. How does that make sense? I'm Frank. Let's find out. Let's get Pickins. What movies are we talking about when we talk about the Sony Spider-Man universe? We're talking about Venom. Venom Let There Be Carnage and Venom The Last Dance. Those were decent. The other 3, Morbius, Madam Web, and the most recent one, Kraven, no, not so much. They were basically the same movie. They were terrible. But why? Why does this happen? What was driving Sony to just put out these low-budget movies that were terrible? Funny you should ask that. To really get the full picture of what was going on with Sony, with Fox, with Disney, Marvel, we're going to take a walk down memory lane. Do you remember a little movie called The Avengers? You might. It was a big one. 2012, that came out. And the audience just loved it. They were invested in all these characters that they'd spent years getting to know and seeing in their own individual movies. They're all in the same movie, and oh my gosh, it's like one of the biggest movies of all time when it comes out, right? $1.5 billion, something insane. That was a good time. The other studios see this and they're like, we can do that, right? DC tried, Fox tried, and Sony tried. And right now, they're all dead. They did not work out so well, right? Fox ended up getting bought out, DC ended up getting rebooted, and Sony just recently threw in the towel. Each of those situations, a little bit different, but we're going to talk about Sony today. Maybe a little bit about Fox, because there's some eerie parallels here. So let's go back to 2012. The Avengers comes out. Cinematic universe is coming together. For years, we've gotten Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, Thor. All this stuff is happening, right? It's building up to this movie, The Avengers. Everybody's like, this is amazing. This is the future. Sony has Spider-Man. They're going to use this as the movie that launches the Sony Spider-Man universe. They tease all kinds of characters throughout the movie. They jam-pack it in with cameos and hints about other characters that are in the wings, waiting to come out. And the result is a very flashy movie, kind of flashy chaos. There's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of storylines, and people just generally did not seem to like it. It bombed. Sony panicked. They spent like $250 million on Amazing Spider-Man 2. It maybe broke even, but probably not even. And so Sony's like, this was going to be the genesis of their whole extra universe. Doc Ock in there, the Vulture, the Rhino ends at the movie, which is just Paul Giamatti as the Rhino. And so Sony doesn't really know what to do. The movie didn't do what they were hoping. And all of these plans, all of these spin-off movies that they had, and there were a lot of them, all kind of got shelved. And Disney kind of somewhat opportunistically, steps in and goes,
hey Sony, that review was pretty terrible. You don't really know what you're doing with Spider-Man, but if you lend him to us and put him in the MCU, you guys will actually make some money on your Spider-Man movies again.
And that was just an offer that was too tempting. The MCU was the hottest thing ever at that point, and they took it. I personally, as a fan, am glad they did. I think Spider-Man in the MCU makes a lot of sense. It added a lot to the future MCU movies. I think the Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland are probably better than most of the other ones. Sorry, Toby. Sorry, Andrew. I think as a fan, that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to see Spider-Man in the MCU, right? So we were all kind of glad that that happened. Unfortunately, Sony has the rights to Spider-Man and something like 900 Spider-Man adjacent characters, right? They have to make a movie every 5 years and so many odd months in order to retain those rights, keep them from reverting back to Marvel. And they still want their cinematic universe. They still want it. They can taste it. They can see Fox has got the X-Men one is hot. MCU is hot. There's rumors about Batman versus Superman coming out, and that's getting a ton of hype at that point. So they're incentivized to spend a little money every once in a while, put out a movie so that they can keep Spider-Man. And they can't stop themselves, right? They can't say, no, I 100% get it, right? You have this IP, you have to do something with it. So Sony Spider-Man Universe is born without Spider-Man. I know. Okay. Disney now has some say in how they use Spider-Man. Because he's part of the MCU, they can't just plop him into a Sony movie without Disney's oversight, right? So they can't just use Spider-Man in all these spin-off movies, because now they're not allowed. They made a deal with Disney. And Disney's got them, right? So they have to look through all these other characters and find the ones that they want to try and make movies out of. So, Venom is up first. They made 3 Venom movies. The first one was good. It was low budget, made a ton of money. I think Tom Hardy as Venom was probably the best casting in the entire Sony Spider-Man universe. They did a pretty good CGI job with the Venom character itself. My only gripe is that I wish they had been R-rated. Those 3 movies made the money for the Sony Spider-Man universe. It was not a lot when it was all said and done because the other ones lost so much. But those were the ones that did something, at least, right? And yes, they did have a Spider-Man cameo at the end of Let There Be Carnage, and it went nowhere, right? There's the brief scene of Eddie Brock being in the MCU and then getting sucked back into his universe, and all he interacts with is the bartender, and it was a tease that was meant to go somewhere, and negotiations fell through, and they just could not make anything happen, so they just wiped it out, which is unfortunate. I think the thing most people would like to see is Tom Holland and Tom Hardy Spider-Man Venom crossover, and I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. But we were always hoping with these movies, maybe Spider-Man shows up in this one. Maybe Spider-Man shows up at the end of this one. And then we got the cameo, and we're like, finally, they're going to do it. And then they pull the rug out from under us. Just one of the problems with the Sony Spider-Man universe is that they did that a lot. So anyway, the other 3 movies, Morbius, which was just a tremendously bad movie that the internet just devoured and made so many memes out of.
It's Morbin time!
Jared Leto as Morbius wasn't a terrible casting, but the movie was just flat and boring, and I'm sorry, it was just not good. Madam Web, I don't even really know what to say with that. That was I don't know why they did what they did with these movies, and they just like threw them out there, and there was no anything to it. And so Madam Web feels like a standalone movie that happens to feature Spider-Women and a baby named Peter Parker, which that was as close to getting Spider-Man as we got, I guess. That one didn't do well. That was fly that bump. And then Kraven came out, and it was R-rated. They pulled out that last stop. They were like, let's just do it. And most of the violence is against animals, which is horrifying, and that wasn't fun. And so that was it. Kraven comes out with like one of the bigger budgets of those 6 films, makes the least amount of money, and just completely bombs out. And so much so that they pretty much stopped marketing it about, a couple weeks before it came out. And that was the end of it. They're just done. So those are the 6 movies. Started off, the best one was the first Venom one financially, and then it just went downhill after that. So from the entire experiment, Sony netted maybe $500 million. Not great for a movie studio. I would happily take $500 million. But I'm not going to make all those crappy movies to do it because nobody's going to pay me that, right? So. Okay, so what went wrong with the Sony Spider-Man universe? Right, we have seen just random characters pulled out of comic book lore and made into giant cinematic hits. Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm looking at you. And we've seen popular characters who just make terrible movies. The movies just don't pan out, right? Some of the Incredible Hulk movies were not great. So what happened with the SSU? What did they do wrong? They did a lot wrong. They did a lot of things. They decided to go low budget on all these films. In a time when Marvel is cranking out $200 million budgets, Fox is raking in $200, $300 million budgets. Sony is putting out sub-$100 million budgets for some of these movies, and I think it shows. I think there are points where they tried to make movies that were different themes, different tones. It doesn't work. Maybe it would work for a Morbius-like character that wasn't called Morbius and wasn't part of some Spider universe, but because we knew it was part of the Spider-Man universe, it was one of Spider-Man's, we were looking for that, and we wanted it to become that. And so they teased us, right? They strung us along for years. At the end of Venom, they teased the next movie. At the end of Let There Be Carnage, they teased the next movie. At the end of The Last Dance, they teased something else. Madam Web, they teased this all-female spider team. Morbius, they tease the Vulture. Kraven, they tease the Chameleon. Maybe there's a Sinister Six movie somewhere. That has been a rumor for decades. The teasing of this interconnectedness of like, maybe this is going somewhere. You do that for like 5, 6, 7 years. We don't care anymore. Like, I'm sorry, Sony. I wanted to care. I really did. I love cinematic universes that are executed properly. And you lost me. You can only cry cinematic universe so many times before we just roll our eyes and go, okay, this is just another movie that's never going to go anywhere because you can't use Spider-Man and nobody is running the freaking ship. Sorry, I get a little upset, right? These movies are so individual, right? I mean, Venom obviously is a trilogy. It's got some cohesion. The other ones do not. They don't tie in at all, except Morbius says, I am Venom once, and it's like, oh, he knows about Venom. So what? That doesn't count. That is not enough. We need actual substance. That is not enough to build a cinematic universe. The audience is not that dumb. You didn't prove anything. You just implied that it was going to happen, and nobody went to see it. I will tell you, honestly, and I just realized this when I was reading about this stuff. I have seen every Spider-Verse movie on a plane. First time on a plane, every time. These are not movies I sought out. I never actually went to the theaters. I didn't even watch them when they were on streaming services. I watched them when I was literally stuck on a plane for 5 hours and had nothing better to do. Every single one of them. I think the more of them you watch on a plane, the lower in quality the universe is. I'm going to go with that. The other problem I have with these movies, outside of maybe Venom, I don't care about these other characters. Not every villain needs a backstory. I get that they're trying to emulate what the MCU did. It's Iron Man and Thor and Captain America and Incredible Hulk. I get that. But that's not who you're doing this with. You're doing this with Morbius and Madam Web and Kraven. Why? What is even happening? I don't know. They don't know. Nobody was running this thing. Sony's got people and they do stuff, but there was not a person that was controlling the direction of these films, tying them together in any kind of way, maybe making an overarching storyline. There's nobody doing that. And I will tell you, I've seen the list of movies that were canceled after Kraven. It got worse. There were characters on there I've never heard of, characters I don't even want to see. Like, why would you do this? They had a better position at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. They could have easily transitioned to a Sinister Six movie, a Black Cat movie, Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4, which were ready to go. I'm actually really glad that they were able to get Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire to show up for No Way Home. I feel like that gave Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man at least some closure, right? I wish they had powered through. I do, and it hurts me to say that because I'm glad that Spider-Man is in the MCU. I would have liked to have seen the conclusion to the Amazing Spider-Man group of movies with the spin-offs there, but it didn't go that way. For some reason, it got turned into 3 Venom movies and then 3 movies about characters that I don't think anybody was really asking for. Let's just call it. Let's just call Time of Death on the Sony Spider-Man Universe. I kind of want the Spider-Man rights to just revert back to Disney, like Fox sold the X-Men rights back to Disney. Let's do it. Let's get on the phone and make that happen. Sorry, Sony. All right, let's get to the big question. Could Spider-Man save the Spider-Verse? I think yes, because that makes these movies relevant. If Spider-Man shows up and fights these guys or helps them to let us know that yes, Spider-Man exists in this universe and he's going to interact with these characters, and all of a sudden they become way more interesting. How does Spider-Man feel about Morbius fighting a vampire in New York City? I don't know. Having Spider-Man in there, I don't know what capacity, but it would have helped. Spider-Man would have driven butts to seats. Spider-Man would have funded this venture to persist through the down movies. Like in the MCU, you have a bad movie that comes out, but the other ones are doing well enough and it carries them through and they can keep going. It could have given it the juice to make it last through these down ones, and then we could get some better movies put together, I think. Here's what I would have done. If you look at the Nick Fury character, the way he shows up in the MCU movies, that was the tease that actually works. This had no build-up, it had nothing to it. If the Madam Web movie came out first, have her be the Nick Fury character, have her manipulating the things in the background, have her point Morbius to the bats, have her point Kraven to, I don't know, whatever he needs to find so that he can go things in a bloody and gruesome fashion. And I hate saying this because I really didn't like the Madam Web character, but that character was well suited to drive a cinematic universe simply because of her power set. That character gives you an easy, almost like a MacGuffin way to do it. Madam Web, even if it was a bad movie, could have been that character to drive the cinematic universe. If Spider-Man wasn't available. If Spider-Man was available, change the whole thing. Make it about Spider-Man and the Sinister Six. Do that movie first. Then do some of the backstories, make some of the team-ups of the villains. I don't know why we need so many anti-heroes. Like, Morbius is one, Kraven's one, Venom's one. That's 3 out of the 4 characters introduced in the universe. Why? And who are the villains? What was the point? What was the point? So I don't know, those are my thoughts. I think Spider-Man and Spider-Man adjacent characters are rich enough and deep enough that you can build a Spider-Man universe. I just think the point has passed where we want that now. I think what we want is just one big universe like we're in the comics that we all grew up and read, and we just want all those characters to interact. I want that experience from the comic books, and I want it not to be hindered because of stupid legal issues and agreements and contracts and rights and all that stuff. Like, I'm tired of that. I think we're all tired of it, right? I want to see Spider-Man playing with Wolverine. I want to see, Deadpool and Spider-Man movie. Like, I want those now. I don't care about the Sinister Six anymore unless it's part of the MCU. That's it. I guess I drank the MCU Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah!
So in order for Spider-Man to join the MCU, the SSU had to die. That's basically it. Unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong. I would love for these things to pay off in some cinematic way that makes a lot of sense and that we all enjoy. That is my hope. Whatever happens. What do you think? Do you think rearranging the movies could have helped? Do you think having a character show up in each of the movies to promote some kind of overarching threat, could that have helped? So yeah, go ahead, like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in and watching me rant about Spider-Man. I feel like J. Jonah Jameson over here. Feel free to mention in the comments what you like. Do you think Spider-Man could have saved the SSU? Do you want to see the Spider-Man and characters in the MCU too? What do you think?